Chapter 144. Hearing this, the group of mercenaries were startled. Their sharp gazes swept over Genshin's body as they carefully observed Genshin. He has a medium build and looks to be in his 20s. His saint weapon is a thin, long, and silvery white longsword. His attack speed is extremely fast, and his movements are very nimble. Captain, this person is very similar to the person the Tianxiong clan is looking for in the mercenary union. I think there's an 80 to 90% chance that he's that Genshin. A mercenary wearing beast skins said to a middle-aged man beside him whose clothes were still in good condition. That's right, leader. I think that this person is definitely Genshin. The Tianxiong clan paid 10,000 purple crystal coins to capture Genshin. If we can capture him, then the 10,000 purple crystal coins will be ours. A skinny mercenary said. As soon as he finished speaking, someone immediately whispered, I think that this person called Genshin won't be so easy to deal with. Didn't you see how he was able to fight a Class 3 magical beast by himself? What are you afraid of? No matter how strong he is still only one person. We have so many people, why should we be afraid of him? If word of this gets out, then our Black Panther mercenary group won't have any face to stay in Wake City. A large man wearing beast skin with a scar on his face said in a low muffled voice. That's right. No matter how strong he is still only one person. Don't tell me that our Black Panther mercenary group can't deal with a 20-year-old brat. At this time, a middle-aged man with a calm expression said in a low voice, Enough, everyone stop arguing. Let's listen to the leader's opinion. As soon as he spoke, the arguing mercenaries all stopped talking. Their gazes converged on the middle-aged man standing at the front of the group, whose clothes were still in good condition. He was the leader of the Black Panther mercenary group. The leader of the Black Panther mercenary group was very tall. That burly body of his was at least 2.5 meters tall. The hair on his head was cut short, leaving only an inch of length. He had an ordinary face, so ordinary that it was hard to attract attention. That black warrior suit that tightly wrapped around his body was tight, and there were many small cracks on it that were cut by the thistles and thorns in the forest. The leader of the Black Panther mercenary group stared closely at Genshin, who was fighting with the armored tortoise beast. His eyes flickered with uncertainty, and after a moment of hesitation he finally made up his mind and said, no matter how strong he is still only in his 20s. Could it be that he can defeat so many of us? Moreover, there is still a third-rank magical beast, the armored tortoise beast, dealing with him. For now, let the armored tortoise beast exhaust his saint force. When both sides are injured, we will go together and capture Genshin and bring him to the Tianxiong clan for a reward of 10,000 purple crystal coins. Good job, leader. If this matter succeeds, then all of us will be rich from now on. 10,000 purple crystal coins, even if we divide it up, it will be enough for us to spend for a lifetime. Immediately, there was someone who said excitedly, Once this matter succeeds, I will definitely go to Wind Moon City and book Miss Xianxia so that she can properly serve me for a few days. A mercenary said with a lewd smile. Ha, Jelly, you have been drooling over that brothel girl in Wind Moon City for a long time. Unfortunately, you don't have the money to enjoy her. Once this matter succeeds, even if you marry that girl named Xianxia, it won't be a problem. A middle-aged man with a large beard on his chin said with a mischievous smile. Hearing this, the mercenary's face revealed a trace of a lustful smile. Immediately after, he looked at Genshin as if he was looking at a mountain of gold. Brr! Right at this time, a miserable cry came from not far away. Genshin, who was fiercely fighting with the shell tortoise, had once again pierced the light wind sword into the beast's throat. Following that, a strong sword chi shot out from the light wind sword and entered the tortoise's body through its throat. With a loud bang, the tortoise's internal organs were crushed into pieces. The tortoise's mouth continuously flowed with blood. Its cumbersome and huge body suddenly stiffened. After a slight pause, it fell to the ground with a bang sound, kicking up a cloud of dust. Go! Just as the shell tortoise fell, the Black Panther mercenary group, under the leadership of their leader, surrounded Genshin. In the end, they completely surrounded Genshin. Jianshan's expression didn't change in the slightest as he slowly pulled out the light wind sword from the tortoise's throat. As if nothing had happened, he walked towards the tortoise's stomach. Immediately after, the light wind sword flashed with a threatening sword chi as it fiercely pierced into the tortoise's stomach, opening up a foot-long wound. With a flick of the sword, a blood-stained hard object flew out and rolled a few times on the ground before coming to a stop. Jianshan squatted down and used his hands to sprinkle some dirt on the object. After cleaning up the blood, a ping-pong ball-sized crystal was revealed. It was the shell tortoise's monster core. Seeing that Jianshan didn't even look at them as if they were invisible, the members of the Black Panther mercenary group all had gloomy expressions on their faces. The leader of the Black Panther mercenary group stared at Jianshan and said in a deep voice, "Jianshan, I didn't expect you to be so calm despite your young age. Even at this time, you still don't seem to be panicking." Jianshan calmly placed the shell tortoise's monster core into his spatial belt. At this time, he raised his head to look at the Black Panther mercenary group and said in a calm voice, "Who are you, and how do you know my name?" Hearing this, the leader of the Black Panther mercenary group sneered and said, "We are members of the Black Panther mercenary group. As for how we know your name, that's very simple. Right now, your name is known by everyone in Wake City." Jianshan slightly wrinkled his brows and said, "Tell me your purpose." "Our purpose is very simple. We just want to ask you to come with us." Just as Jianshan finished speaking, one of the mercenaries opened his mouth to speak. "That's right, we just want to ask you to come with us. As long as you are obedient, we, the Black Panther mercenary group, definitely won't make things difficult for you." A skinny mercenary laughed mischievously. Jianshan's face revealed a trace of a cold smile as he said, "Then where do you want me to go with you?" "Where else can we go?" "Of course back to Wake City," a large man said in a low muffled voice. Hearing this, Jianshan faintly guessed that this matter most likely had something to do with the Tianxiong clan. "What if I don't go with you?" Jianshan's face was indifferent as he stared at the 20 mercenaries surrounding him. His tone was indifferent, and from his face, there wasn't the slightest trace of fear. Hearing this, the faces of the members of the Black Panther mercenary group slightly changed. The tall leader even directly took out his own saint weapon, a 3-meter-long spear. "If you don't go with us, then we will have to use force. Jianshan, I'm sure you don't want to suffer physical pain," the leader of the Black Panther mercenary group said in a low voice. Chapter 145. Jianshan, I'll give you one last chance. Do you want to come with us willingly, or do you want us to use force? Once we start fighting, you'll definitely suffer. The leader of the Black Panther mercenaries coldly glared at Jianshan as he spoke. Jianshan lightly snorted as a disdainful sneer appeared on his face. "With your strength as a Saint Master, you don't have the qualifications to speak to me. Today, let's see if you'll capture me, or if I'll kill you all one by one." Finished speaking, a layer of hazy sword aura appeared from the light wind sword, enveloping the silver blade. Following that, Jianshan's body slightly swayed as he appeared in front of the weakest members of the Black Panther mercenaries. The light wind sword in his hand turned into a white blur as he stabbed out with lightning speed. "You're courting death. Brat, you're too arrogant." Just as Jianshan made his move, the members of the Black Panther mercenaries angrily cursed as they charged towards Jianshan. Poof, poof, poof. Just as the Black Panther mercenaries began to move, Jianshan's light wind sword pierced through 3 of their throats. Facing Jianshan's lightning-fast sword speed and Jianshan's sudden attack, the Black Panther mercenaries didn't even have time to react before their throats were pierced. Jianshan didn't hesitate as he immediately pulled out his light wind sword and began to fight with the Black Panther mercenaries around him. Although the Black Panther mercenaries had an absolute advantage in terms of numbers, there were only 7 people who could attack Jianshan at the same time. The rest of the mercenaries were all on guard outside. On one hand, they were preventing Jianshan from escaping, and on the other hand, they could provide support at any time. Among the 7 members of the Black Panther mercenaries, including the captain, there were a total of 5 Saint Masters and 2 high-level Great Saints. The members of the Black Panther mercenaries weren't stupid. They knew that someone who dared to offend the Tianxiong clan definitely wasn't weak, so the 5 strongest Saint Masters in the group all attacked at the same time. Xianxia faced the attacks of 5 Saint Masters and 2 high-level saints with ease. Back when he was still a mid-level great saint, he dared to face so many Saint Masters of the Tianxiong clan. Now that he was a high-level great saint, he was only a step away from becoming a Saint Master. Although it was only a small increase in strength, it was enough to increase Xianxia's strength by a lot. Now that he was a high-level great saint, facing the attacks of 5 Saint Masters was no longer as difficult as when he was in Wake City. The speed of Xianxia's sword was incomparably fast. The silver-white longsword in his hand had already turned into a silver-white barrier of light, unceasingly blocking the attacks coming from all directions. The light wind sword and the saint weapon in his opponent's hand clashed, creating a constant ding-ding-dang-dang-dang sound. Following the intense collision between the 2 saint weapons, the saint force contained within the saint weapon began to spread out, causing the ground to be filled with dust and smoke. Xianxia's sword speed became faster and faster. After blocking the saint weapons of the 5 Saint Masters, the light wind sword immediately turned into a silver light and pierced through the throats of the 2 Saint Masters. Kerlai! Cheng Buping! Seeing the deaths of the 2 Saint Masters, the Black Panther mercenaries who had a good relationship with the 2 Saint Masters all let out sorrowful cries. Immediately after, several people raised their saint weapons and charged towards Xianxia. Xianxia flashed out of the encirclement formed by the 5 Saint Masters and fiercely fought with the Saint Masters of the Black Panther mercenaries. Following a few flashes of sword light, a few more people had their throats pierced by Xianxia and their hearts were pierced. You dare to kill my Black Panther mercenaries, Xianxia, you're courting death. Seeing several people die in the blink of an eye, the leader of the Black Panther mercenaries flew into a rage. The long spear in his hand whistled through the air as it pierced towards Xianxia's back. As if he had a pair of eyes on the back of Xianxia's head, he suddenly turned around and thrust his sword forward. Ding! Following the sound of metal colliding, the light wind sword and the spear collided in midair. The 2 weapons separated upon contact, but Xianxia's body did not retreat. In a flash, he had crossed the distance of 3 meters and arrived in front of the Black Panther mercenary group's leader. With a flash of silver light, the light wind sword pierced through the Black Panther mercenary group's leader's throat. The sharp tip of the light wind sword pierced through the back of his neck, leaving behind a trail of blood. The leader of the Black Panther mercenaries' body suddenly stiffened. His eyes were filled with disbelief as he stared at the thin and long sword that had pierced through his throat. Following that, he turned his eyes towards Xianxia and said with difficulty, How could I die by your hands? Leader Cargill. Seeing the leader of the Black Panther mercenaries' throat being pierced, the faces of all the mercenaries changed greatly. After being stunned for a moment, they all cried out in alarm. He killed Leader Cargill. Brothers, let's avenge our leader. Avenge Leader Cargill? Everyone together, let's kill Xianxia. The members of the Black Panther mercenaries were all agitated as they shouted and charged towards Xianxia. You don't know the difference between life and death. Xianxia coldly snorted as he pulled out his light wind sword. With a flash of his sword, he enveloped the people at the very front and pierced their throats in an instant. Following that, Xianxia's figure nimbly flashed through the crowd as he continuously stabbed out with his light wind sword. One after another, people fell under his sword. Facing Xianxia's extremely fast sword, the great Saint mercenaries were unable to resist at all. Even the Saint Masters were unable to hold on for long. In a short period of time, the Black Panther mercenaries had lost more than 10 people under Xianxia's sword. Right now, there were only 2 Saint Masters and 4 great saints left. The 6 of them had already lost the courage to continue fighting. They looked at each other, knowing that if they continued to stay, only death awaited them. The only way to survive was to escape. Thinking of this, the 6 of them did not hesitate at all and immediately scattered in all directions. Xianxia coldly laughed as his eyes swept over the crowd. His eyes fell on a great saint mercenary and his body flickered as he quickly chased after that person. As for the other 5 people who were running away, Xianxia did not pay any attention to them. How could this great saint mercenary escape from Genshin's pursuit? In the blink of an eye, he was blocked by Genshin. What do you want to do? Seeing Genshin suddenly appear in front of him, the mercenary's face turned pale as he timidly took out his saint weapon and spoke with a trembling voice. The light wind sword had already disappeared from Genshin's hand. Genshin slowly crossed his arms in front of his chest as he calmly stared at the mercenary who was much older than him. He lightly said, "Do you want to live?" The mercenary replied without hesitation. But then, as if he had understood something, a trace of hope appeared on his face as he asked in disbelief, "Could it be that you're willing to let me go? Letting you go is no big deal. Killing you is meaningless to me. As long as you cooperate with me and tell me what I want to know, I'll let you go," Genshin said. Hearing Genshin's words, the mercenary's eyes revealed a trace of pleasant surprise as he said, "Okay, as long as you're willing to let me go, I'll definitely tell you everything I know. I won't dare to hide anything from you." Genshin slightly nodded and said, "Let me ask you, what method did the Tianxiong clan use to deal with me? How did you recognize me?" As soon as Genshin's voice fell, the mercenary didn't hesitate and immediately replied, "The Tianxiong clan placed a bounty of 10,000 purple crystal coins on your capture in the mercenary union. At the same time, they also revealed some of your characteristics. So when we saw you fight with the shelled tortoise, we immediately recognized you as the person who the Tianxiong clan placed a bounty on." Genshin frowned slightly. The Tianxiong clan had placed a high bounty in the mercenary union, urging the mercenaries to capture him. This was beyond his expectations. After hesitating for a while, Genshin's eyes suddenly lit up. He couldn't help but reveal a trace of a sinister smile as he said, "I can let you go, but you have to do something for me." "What is it?" "As long as I, Clin, can do it, I will definitely do my best," the mercenary solemnly vowed. Perhaps it was to make Genshin believe in him even more, but he said this with an abnormally firm tone. "After you return to Wake City, do your best to spread the news that I'm in the magical Beast Mountain range. I want everyone in Wake City to know that I'm here, understood?" Genshin's gaze was tightly fixed on the mercenary. "Understood, I understand." Although he didn't know what Genshin wanted to do, the mercenary still immediately agreed. He didn't dare open his mouth to ask, afraid that if he angered Genshin, he would lose his life. Genshin thought for a while before continuing, "Also, tell them that I'm already heavily injured, understood?" "Understood, understood. Don't worry, I'll definitely spread the word about your intentions." The mercenary hurriedly agreed. Genshin nodded with satisfaction and waved his hand, "You can go." The mercenary acted as if he had been granted amnesty. Without the slightest hesitation, he immediately ran outside as fast as he could, as if he was afraid that Genshin would suddenly change his mind and take his life. Chapter 146. Genshin counted the monster cores he found from the Black Panther mercenaries. Among the 100 monster cores, more than half of them were rank 3 monster cores, while the rest were rank 2 monster cores. Just from the number of monster cores, it was clear that the Black Panther mercenaries had spent a long time collecting them. Unfortunately, because of their greed, many of them had lost their lives at the hands of Genshin. And the monster cores they had collected after countless battles with magical beasts ended up in the hands of Genshin. Their previous efforts were all for someone else. Genshin was in a good mood as he stored the 100 monster cores into his spatial belt. Although he hunted at least 20 to 30 monster cores a day, these 100 monster cores were still not a small amount to him. It was enough to sustain his cultivation for several days. "I really hope that mercenary can complete the mission I gave him. A reward of 10,000 purple coins is not a small amount. I'm sure that many mercenaries will be moved by it." Genshin muttered to himself. Then, a smile of anticipation appeared on his face as he said, "I hope that they won't have too few monster cores. This will be another great harvest. As the saying goes, people die for wealth and birds die for food. Since you guys couldn't resist the temptation and came to deal with me, then don't blame me for being ruthless." Towards the end of his sentence, a dense killing intent flashed through Genshin's eyes. "These 2 days, I have to quickly increase my strength. Otherwise, if I meet a group that is too strong, Although I won't be captured, it will still be very difficult to deal with them. In addition, I have to be on guard against great Saint Masters. With my current strength, dealing with a high-level Saint Master is not a problem, but if I meet a great Saint Master, then it will be very troublesome. If I'm not careful, I might have to run for my life again. Although great Saint Master level experts are extremely rare in a third-grade city like Wake City, it's not like they don't exist. It's just that they are as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. No one can guarantee that there won't be a great Saint Master level expert who won't be able to resist the temptation of 10,000 purple crystal coins and come to deal with me. It seems like I have to quickly raise my strength to the Saint Master level in the next few days. That way, even if I meet a great Saint Master level expert, I'll still have the strength to fight. Xianxia pondered. After making up his mind, he didn't continue to hunt magic beasts. Instead, he came to a nearby hill. He passed through a thicket of thorns and arrived in front of a cliff. The cliff was covered with tall weeds. Xianxia arrived in front of the mountain wall and gently pushed aside a patch of thick weeds, revealing a dark cave entrance. Xianxia had accidentally discovered this cave 2 days ago. Xianxia took out some materials from his spatial belt and made a simple torch. He lit it and walked into the cave. The cave was extremely narrow and could only fit one person at a time. The ground was uneven, and from the various marks on the walls, it was clear that this cave was man-made. After following the slightly curved path for around 30 meters, Xianxia finally arrived at the end of the cave. At the end of the cave was a huge space with a radius of 10 meters and a height of 3 meters. The ground was extremely flat, and on one side was a stone table and a stone chair that was 1 meter long. When he discovered this cave 2 days ago, Xianxia knew that someone had stayed in this cave for quite some time. However, from the thick layer of dust that had accumulated on the ground, it was clear that no one had been here for a long time. Xianxia inspected the cave. After confirming that it was safe, he inserted the torch into the wall and sat cross-legged in the center. He took out a few Class 2 monster cores and began to cultivate. Cultivating in this secluded cave was definitely much safer than outside. This allowed Xianxia to fully immerse himself in cultivating. These few days, Xianxia still had quite a bit of monster cores from the magical beasts he had hunted in the Magic Beast Mountain range. In addition to the hundreds of monster cores he had just found from the Black Panther mercenary group, the amount of monster cores in Xianxia's possession was enough for him to cultivate for a month. Therefore, Xianxia didn't have to worry about the lack of monster cores for the time being. The energy within the monster cores was constantly being absorbed by Xianxia's body at a terrifying speed. The powerful energy gathered around Xianxia's body and gradually formed an extremely weak light. Because of the purple and green light in his dantian, Xianxia's absorption of energy from the monster cores was 100 times faster than normal. However, almost all of the energy was absorbed by the purple and green light in his dantian. Xianxia was only able to absorb a very small portion of the energy. Even so, Xianxia's cultivation speed was still much faster than normal. Within Xianxia's dantian, the dense saint force formed a vague shape of a sword. This sword was somewhat similar to Xianxia's light wind sword, but it was very blurry. Even the hilt could only be vaguely seen. As the energy within the monster cores continued to be absorbed by Xianxia, the saint force in his dantian formed a sword at an extremely slow speed. The energy contained within was also growing at a speed visible to the naked eye. At this speed, it would take me at least 10 days to half a month to reach the Saint Master level. No, this is too slow. Xianxia's eyebrows slightly wrinkled. The purple and green light in his dantian were absorbing too much energy, causing Xianxia to feel a little dissatisfied. Let's see if I can steal the energy from it. Suddenly, Xianxia's heart stirred. He immediately focused his mind and began to forcefully steal the energy that was being absorbed by the purple and green light in his dantian. However, the purple and green light in his dantian were absorbing energy at an extremely fast speed. Xianxia was only able to steal a small amount of energy even with all his strength. Even so, Xianxia was still satisfied. This was because this small amount of energy was enough to increase his cultivation speed by another 10 to 20%. If he could maintain this speed, then it would only take a few days for him to reach the Saint Master level. Within the cave, Xianxia sank into a state of cultivation. Outside of the magical Beast Mountain range, Wake City was once again bustling with activity because of a certain matter. A piece of news came from the mouth of a mercenary. Although no one knew if this piece of news was true or false, it caused many powerful mercenary groups and powers to go to war. The person that the Tianxiong clan had placed a bounty of 10,000 purple crystal coins on had actually appeared in the magical Beast Mountain range. Moreover, he was alone and was heavily injured, causing his strength to sharply decline. This piece of news that couldn't be verified caused many mercenary groups to set out for the mountain range of magical beasts. They all had the mindset that it was better to believe it was true than not. After all, 10,000 purple crystal coins wasn't a small sum, and the target was a youth who wasn't even 20 years old. In the eyes of many, this was an extremely simple mission. The only problem was that it was extremely difficult to find the person. Now that the target mission had appeared, there were very few people who could resist the temptation of 10,000 purple crystal coins. Even though many of them knew that the target's strength wasn't weak, causing the powerful Tianxiong clan to suffer a huge loss, they still weren't afraid. In just a few days, the news of Xianxia being heavily injured in the magical Beast Mountain range had already spread to the nearby cities and towns. As a result, many mercenary groups and powers from other regions all rushed to Wake City, causing more and more mercenaries to gather in Wake City. Seeing that the situation had developed to such a stage, some of the Lone Rangers who were confident in their own abilities also entered the mountain range of magical beasts, hoping to try their luck and see what was going on. Many of them were hoping to fish in troubled waters. In the blink of an eye, 7 days had passed. In a cave within the mountain range of magical beasts, Xianxia was still sitting cross-legged on the ground, absorbing the energy from the monster cores to cultivate. The torches on the walls of the cave had long since been extinguished. The entire cave was pitch black, to the point where one couldn't even see their own fingers. In these few days, Xianxia seemed to have completely immersed himself in the pleasure of cultivating. As the saint force in his body continued to increase, Xianxia could clearly feel that his strength was rapidly increasing. In these few days, Xianxia had been sitting cross-legged on the ground, not moving at all. Only when he was exchanging for monster cores did he move his arms and legs. When he took out the monster cores, he once again entered a state of cultivation. For several days, Xianxia did not eat or drink. Immersed in cultivation, it was as if he could not feel hunger or thirst. Chapter 147. At this moment, a powerful pulse of energy radiated from Xianxia's body. At this moment, the rate at which he absorbed the energy from the monster cores actually increased. As the energy from the monster cores surged out like wild horses, the dense energy gathered around Xianxia and formed a white mist visible to the naked eye. The white mist emitted a hazy light, which was extremely obvious in the pitch-black cave. It was like a lamp that illuminated Xianxia's body that was hidden in the darkness. At the same time, all the pores on Xianxia's body suddenly opened wide. They seemed to have turned into extremely hungry children, opening their large mouths and greedily absorbing the surrounding energy that had already formed a faint white mist. The frantic absorption of energy from his pores brought some pain to Xianxia's body. It felt like countless ants were biting him all over. The numb and itchy feeling spread to his heart, making him panic. Xianxia sat on the ground peacefully like an old monk in meditation. He was indifferent to the numb and itchy feeling all over his body, as if he couldn't feel the pain at all. Within his body, the dense and pure energy turned into ripples of energy that gathered in his dantian. In the end, it was absorbed by the saint weapon floating in his dantian. After the saint weapon absorbed the energy, not only did its color slowly change, even the model of the sword became clearer and clearer. The energy it contained was even more powerful than before. Moreover, as the energy was constantly absorbed by the saint weapon, the energy it contained was also constantly increasing. Right now, Xianxia had reached the crucial moment of breaking through to the Saint Master level. This scene continued for 4 hours before the monster core in Xianxia's hand ran out of energy once again. Afterwards, Jianshan immediately took out a few more Class 3 monster cores from his space belt and began cultivating again. Time silently passed. Very soon, half a day had passed. In the pitch-black cave, Jianshan still maintained his original appearance as he cultivated. The layer of white mist completely formed from dense energy around him had already become denser and denser. The faint light it emitted also seemed to have become a bit brighter. Right at this moment, a formless aura suddenly emitted from Jianshan's body and filled the entire cave. The aura continued to increase, and in the end, it actually gradually evolved into a gale. The gale whistled in the narrow cave, and the thick layer of dust on the ground was swept high into the air and blown in all directions. The faint white mist completely formed from surging energy around Jianshan's body suddenly churned violently. Then, it was sucked into Jianshan's body like a whale sucking in water. In the blink of an eye, it was completely absorbed by Jianshan. At this moment, the speed at which Jianshan absorbed energy was actually several times faster than before. His strength also successfully broke through to the Saint Master level from the Great Saint level at this moment. However, the moment Jianshan broke through, the two specks of light in his dantian actually did not continue to compete with Jianshan for energy. Jianshan finally opened his eyes slowly. The moment he opened his eyes, a weak light shot out from his eyes and disappeared in a flash. The light was weak, but it was extremely obvious in the pitch-black cave. Sensing the surging saint force within him that was several times more powerful than it had been a few days ago, an excited smile finally appeared on Jianshan's face. Afterward, a silver-white sword suddenly appeared in his hand. The entire sword gave off a weak silver-white glow, dispersing much of the darkness nearby. A sharp light flashed in Jianshan's eyes, and in the next moment, the silver-white light on the sword began to emit a strong sword chi. Immediately after, Jianshan stabbed out with the sword and a small sword chi escaped from the sword and shot towards the wall of the cave with lightning speed. In the pitch-black cave, there was a flash of silver-white light. The sword chi had already shot into the wall of the cave with lightning speed, disappearing without a sound. It only left behind an extremely small mark on the tough wall. Jianshan's body slightly swayed and like a ghost, he appeared in front of the cave wall and stabbed the light wind sword towards the wall. Pooh! With a light sound, the wall of the cave seemed as fragile as tofu in front of the light wind sword. The light wind sword's 4-foot-long blade had completely penetrated the wall, leaving only the hilt outside. When the light wind sword pierced the wall, Jianshan didn't feel the slightest bit of resistance. In front of the light wind sword, the wall seemed even more fragile than tofu. Although Jianshan had been able to pierce the wall with the light wind sword before, it definitely wasn't as easy as this. Slowly pulling out the light wind sword, Jianshan's heart was filled with confidence. Even if he were to face Tianxianglai again, he wouldn't be able to win, but he would definitely be able to put up a fight. After becoming a Saint Master, Jianshan was no longer worried about being surrounded by a group of mercenaries. Even if there were great Saint Masters amongst them, he would still be able to escape unscathed. Sheathing the light wind sword, Jianshan patted off the dust that had accumulated over the past few days. Afterwards, he lit a torch on the wall and left the cave without any reluctance. By the time Jianshan left the cave, 5 days had already passed. The sun was shining brightly in the sky, and it was noon. Jianshan's eyes indifferently swept around the area. After finding a direction, he left the cave. I hope that the Black Panther mercenaries won't disappoint me. Now that he had become a Saint Master, there were very few people in this small wake city who could make him feel apprehensive. Now that he had become a Saint Master, there were very few people in this small wake city who could make him feel apprehensive. Jianshan leisurely strolled through the mountain range of magical beasts. This region was located on the outskirts of the mountain range of magical beasts, and the only things that could be found here were 2nd or 3rd rank magical beasts. If it was before, Jianshan would have to be a bit more careful, but now, as long as he didn't encounter something like the golden-striped silver snake, even a 3rd rank magical beast wouldn't be able to pose the slightest threat to him. At that moment, Jianshan's ears twitched and he suddenly stopped in his tracks. From the sound of it, he could tell that the person who was speaking was approaching him. However, because of the dense vegetation in front of him, Xianxia's line of sight was obstructed, so he couldn't see the other party. "Harry, we've been searching here for a few days now. We've encountered quite a few devil beasts, but we haven't found a single person that looks like Xianxia. Do you think Xianxia is still here? Could it be that he got the news and ran away a long time ago?" "Fiji, stop complaining. The Devil Beast mountain range is so big, and the terrain is so complicated. I'm sure you know how difficult it is to find a single person. Moreover, I heard that Xianxia was heavily injured. Even if he wanted to escape, he wouldn't be able to get far. Who knows, he might be hiding somewhere to heal himself." "That's right. I'm guessing that Xianxia is hiding somewhere to heal himself and doesn't dare to come out." "That's right. There are so many people who entered the Devil Beast mountain range this time. If Xianxia wasn't hiding somewhere, he would have been discovered long ago. Even if he wasn't discovered, he would have been eaten by devil beasts a long time ago." "That makes sense. Let's continue our search. Even if we can't find him, we can still kill a few devil beasts and obtain a few magic cores to train with." As they spoke, they pushed aside the plants in front of them, and Xianxia, who was standing in front of them, appeared in their line of sight. At this moment, Xianxia was still dressed in animal hide, and his face was covered in dirt, obscuring his facial features. Upon seeing Xianxia, the mercenaries were all slightly startled. At this moment, Xianxia finally saw their faces. There were 7 or 8 of them, all around 30 years of age. All of them were covered in dirt and grime, and their clothes were in tatters. Clearly, they had been in the Devil Beast mountain range for several days. At this moment, the person in front of them stepped forward and said to Xianxia, "My friend, from the looks of it, you must have been in the Devil Beast mountain range for quite some time." A strange smile appeared on Xianxia's face as he slowly said, "That's right, I have indeed been in the Devil Beast mountain range for quite some time." "Then, my friend, do you know of the recent events that have occurred in Wake City?" The mercenary stared intently at Xianxia as he asked again. Hearing this, Xianxia's face revealed a playful smile as he said, "I wonder if the events you speak of are related to a person called Xianxia?" "Yes, that's the matter. It seems that this friend most likely entered the Devil Beast mountain range because of this matter. Looking at your attire, you must have entered the Devil Beast mountain range before the rest of us. I wonder if this friend has any news regarding Xianxia?" The mercenary quickly asked. "News regarding Xianxia?" The smile on Xianxia's face was very strange as he slightly nodded and said, "You have asked the right person. That's right, I happen to know the whereabouts of Xianxia." "What? You know the whereabouts of Xianxia?" Hearing this, the group of mercenaries were shocked, and the mercenary who asked the question had an inexplicable surprise on his face. He had casually asked this question, and he didn't expect that the person in the beast's skin opposite him would give him a satisfactory answer. But he didn't expect that the truth would often be unexpected, and his casual question actually hit the nail on the head by a stroke of luck. "This friend, may I ask where Xianxia is right now?" Immediately, one of the mercenaries impatiently asked. It seemed that in their eyes, Xianxia was a mountain of treasures. They didn't even consider whether they had the strength to deal with him. A faint smile hung on Xianxia's face as he slowly said, "Far away on the horizon, but close at hand." Xianxia looked at the mercenaries with a playful expression. "A few great saints also want to capture me. It seems that the Tianxiong clan's bounty of 10,000 purple crystal coins has gone to their heads." Xianxia secretly thought to himself. Chapter 148. The mercenaries' words caused the rest of the mercenaries to be startled. They all looked at Xianxia with faces full of shock and disbelief. None of them would have thought that after searching for so many people in the Devil Beast mountain range for so many days, Xianxia would actually be found by them. What was even more laughable was that they actually found Xianxia under such circumstances. The mercenaries were stunned for a moment before one of them bitterly smiled and said, "I say, brother, you don't need to joke with us like this. Moreover, this kind of joke shouldn't be made. If there really is an idiot who believes you, then they might actually capture you and take you to the Tianxiong clan for a reward." Hearing this mercenary's words, the rest of the mercenaries also came to a realization. They all had a bitter smile on their faces. Just now, they were really shocked by Genshin's words. This friend, the name Genshin, is very important right now. In the future, it would be best if you don't make this kind of joke. Otherwise, I'm afraid it will bring you a lot of trouble. Another mercenary said. None of them actually believed that the person in front of them was the person they were looking for, Genshin. Genshin bitterly smiled and said, "Then how can you believe that I am Genshin? According to what I know, Genshin's saint weapon is an extremely small sword, and he isn't very old either, only around 20 years of age. Moreover, his speed is extremely fast, especially when it comes to thrusting. It's so fast that even a few saint masters find it difficult to dodge. I heard that quite a few saint masters have died to his hands because they couldn't dodge his sword," said a mercenary. The silver-white light wind sword appeared in Genshin's hand. Genshin held the light wind sword and said with a faint smile, "Then take a look and see if this is the sword that Genshin uses." Hearing this, the mercenaries all looked at the light wind sword in Genshin's hand and carefully examined it. "Look, this sword looks a bit like the one described." "Yes, it really does look like it. It's practically the same." Immediately, two of the mercenaries couldn't help but open their mouths. Hearing their words, the rest of the mercenaries also became serious. Their gazes towards Genshin had already undergone a subtle change. "You really are Genshin." One of the mercenaries stared at Genshin's face that was covered in dust and asked in a deep voice. At this point, the mercenaries with a bit of brains had already realized that the person in front of them was the person that they were looking for. Genshin smiled and said, "That's right, I am Genshin, the Genshin. Now that I'm here, shouldn't we capture me and bring me back to the Tianxiong clan to receive the reward? Hearing this, the merry faces of the mercenaries suddenly became serious. Looking at each other, one of them immediately shouted, "Brothers, surround him." As soon as his voice fell, the person who spoke took the lead and rushed towards Genshin. The rest of the mercenaries hesitated for a moment before rushing forward and forming a circle around Genshin. Genshin sheathed his light wind sword and crossed his arms in front of his chest. With an indifferent expression, he looked at the mercenaries surrounding him and said with disdain, "It seems that quite a few of you have been blinded by the reward of 10,000 purple coins. I never thought that a few great saints would want to capture me alive. Haven't you heard that many saint masters have died by my hands? Do you really think that you are stronger than a saint master?" Hearing Genshin's words, the mercenaries hesitated for a moment before one of them shouted, "Genshin, don't force yourself. Who doesn't know that you are heavily injured and your strength is much weaker than before? If you know what's good for you, you should obediently come with us. Otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite. When that time comes, don't say that we are bullying you because we outnumber you." Genshin helplessly shook his head and muttered, "It seems that all of you have been blinded by money. You don't even care about your own lives. Forget it, I'm too lazy to waste my time with you." With that, Genshin did not waste any more words. Suddenly, his body swayed slightly, and he appeared in front of a mercenary in an instant. He clenched his right hand into a fist and struck out with lightning speed, landing a heavy blow on the mercenary's nose. "Ah!" The mercenary immediately let out a blood-curdling scream. His face was filled with pain as he held his nose. Bright red blood slowly flowed out from the gaps between his fingers. Very quickly, his entire face was dyed red. Genshin's punch had already broken the mercenary's nose. After punching the mercenary's nose, Genshin didn't hesitate in the slightest. He immediately kicked the mercenary's stomach and sent him flying 5 meters away. Afterwards, Genshin's body flickered and appeared in front of another mercenary. Powerful saint force gathered in his leg as he kicked the mercenary's chest without any fancy moves. Bang! With a muffled sound, the mercenary was sent flying by Genshin's kick before he could even react. Blood uncontrollably spurted out of his mouth as he flew through the air. "Genshin, you despicable person actually used a sneak attack. Everyone attack together and take him down." Only when Genshin injured 2 of them did the other mercenaries react. They immediately raised their saint weapons and slashed at Genshin. Genshin's body nimbly dodged their attacks. His figure flashed as he approached the other party. His fists and legs combined as he ruthlessly struck the mercenaries' bodies. Muffled ping 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 sounds continuously rang out. Now that he had reached the Saint Master realm, Xianxia could easily deal with these mercenaries who were only great saints even without using his sword. Every swordsman viewed their sword as incomparably important. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that it was their second life. Xianxia was naturally no exception. The mercenaries in front of him weren't worthy of Xianxia's appearance. If he had to use his sword against such a powerful person, it would undoubtedly be like using a butcher's knife to kill a chicken. Although Xianxia was currently using his fists and legs, these mercenaries were still unable to resist. In just a few breaths of time, they were all beaten to the ground by Xianxia. Every one of them had a bloody nose and a swollen face. Xianxia clapped his hands. His gaze swept past the mercenaries who were lying on the ground and wailing in pain. He smiled faintly and said, "Now, do you still want to capture me and take me for the bounty?" Chapter 149. Xianxia frowned when he saw the mercenary kneeling on the ground and kowtowing. He looked down on people like this from the bottom of his heart. "Fei Lan, what are you doing? Hurry up and get up. You've thrown away all of our faces. At worst, we'll just die. What's there to be afraid of?" One of the mercenaries immediately scolded when he saw the mercenary kneeling on the ground and kowtowing. "Fei Lan, you coward. I don't usually have a brother like you." When the mercenary called Fei Lan knelt down, his other companions looked at him differently. Their eyes were filled with disdain. Xianxia's gaze slowly swept across the faces of the other mercenaries. His eyes revealed a trace of admiration. Xianxia looked down on people who were cowards. "Do you guys have anything else to say?" Xianxia didn't even look at the mercenary kneeling and kowtowing as he spoke to the others. Hearing this, the mercenaries looked at each other. At this moment, a trace of sadness and regret appeared in their eyes. Obviously, they also understood that their fate was very likely to be staying here forever. They wouldn't be able to see the sun tomorrow. "If you want to kill us, then do as you please. There's nothing to say." A mercenary with a more stubborn temper said hatefully. Xianxia only used his fists and legs to defeat them in a short span of a few breaths. The strength he displayed had already made the mercenaries give up on the idea of running away. Everyone knew that the chances of escaping alive were close to zero. "Now, I'll give you a chance to live. Hand over all the monster cores above Class 2 on you, and then you can leave. Otherwise, only death awaits you. You can decide for yourself what you want to do." Xianxia's voice was extremely gentle. Hearing this, the mercenaries didn't hesitate and immediately nodded in agreement. Then, they all obediently took out all the magic cores above rank 2 from their spatial belts and placed them on the ground one by one. Although they were very reluctant, they weren't stupid and knew what to do at this time. Xianxia glanced at the less than 10 magic cores in front of the mercenaries and said, "Hand over the magic cores." Immediately, a mercenary picked up the magic cores on the ground and obediently handed them to Xianxia. Reaching out to take the magic cores that the mercenary handed over, Xianxia waved his hand and said, "Go, go, I'm in a good mood today, so I'll let you guys go for now. If there's a next time, I won't be so kind." The mercenaries didn't dare to stay in the slightest and immediately fled with their tails between their legs. Seeing the mercenaries disappear into the forest, Xianxia smiled and put away the magic cores into his spatial belt. Kneading his fists, he murmured, "I don't know how many years it's been since I used my fists and legs to beat someone. Although I'm a little rusty, it feels pretty good." Rank 2 magic beasts shouldn't be easy to kill for those mercenaries. Not only were they taught a lesson by me, I even took away the few rank 2 magic cores they had. They probably won't let this matter go so easily. I reckon that many people will soon know that I, Xianxia, have appeared in this area. Hee, I wonder how many people will be blinded by the 10,000 purple crystal coins. I hope the people who come aren't too weak. Otherwise, this little plan of mine will soon be ruined. I must take advantage of this good opportunity to reap a large harvest. In any case, those people are all here to capture me, so they are all enemies. Against enemies, there's no need for me to hold back. Moreover, the law of the jungle is the law of survival in this world. Xianxia's face gradually revealed a trace of expectation. Due to the fact that the amount of magic cores he used on his path of cultivation was 10 times or even 100 times that of others, he had no choice but to think of ways to obtain more magic cores. Because of the 2 spots of light in his dantian, one purple and one green, Xianxia had no choice but to give up on absorbing the yuan qi of heaven and earth to cultivate. He could only rely on magic cores to increase his strength. Not long after the mercenaries that had been released by Xianxia left, they immediately spread the news of Xianxia's location. 1 spread to 10, 10 spread to 100. Xianxia's location quickly spread throughout the entire mountain range of magical beasts. Immediately, those mercenaries who had received the news and were still blindly searching everywhere, as well as various powers, all rushed to the place where Xianxia had appeared. At this moment, Xianxia was still at his original location and had not left. He was hiding in a large tree that was more than 30 meters tall. The dense foliage had completely covered his tracks, but through the gaps between the branches and leaves, he could faintly see the situation below. Not long after, a group of approximately 40 people slowly passed by the tree that Xianxia was hiding in. This group of people wore steel helmets and armor, and every one of them was armed to the teeth. As the group moved, there was not the slightest bit of disorder in their formation. From the looks of it, they were a group of well-trained soldiers. When Xianxia saw the group of mercenaries below through the gaps between the leaves, the name of a mercenary group quickly surfaced in his mind. Immediately, his face became somewhat gloomy, and an intense killing intent flashed in his eyes. Following the sound of leaves rustling, Xianxia had already jumped down from the large tree that he was hiding in. "Who's there? Careful, there's someone on the tree." Just as Xianxia made the sound, someone from the group of armored mercenaries below immediately shouted loudly. Immediately, all of them took out their holy weapons and vigilantly stared upwards. Xianxia's feet pushed against the tree trunk, and his body glided through the air for nearly 20 meters. Finally, like a feather, he landed on the ground, just in time to block the group of mercenaries. "Who are you?" The armored mercenary at the front stared sharply at Xianxia as he sternly shouted. Xianxia's face was somewhat gloomy as he swept his gaze across the group of mercenaries. Unfortunately, he couldn't find any familiar faces. Finally, he opened his mouth and said, "You are the Zhou mercenary group." Xianxia's voice was somewhat gloomy. "That's right, we are the Zhou mercenary group. Who are you, and why are you blocking our way?" The mercenary at the front said arrogantly. The Zhou mercenary group's strength was not weak. Even in Wake City, they were ranked in the top 5. Adding on the fact that they belonged to the Zhou clan of Wake City, it was enough to make the members of the Zhou mercenary group feel proud. After confirming the identity of the other party, a strong killing intent surged out from Xianxia's body. Immediately after, Xianxia did not waste any more words. The silver-white light wind sword appeared in his hand, and in a flash, he charged towards the Zhou mercenary group. Chapter 150. In a flash, Xianxia appeared in front of the Zhou mercenary group. Without any fancy movements, the light wind sword in his hand pierced towards the person at the front of the group. The tip of the light wind sword was as fast as lightning, and in an instant, it was already in front of the person's throat. Feeling the incomparable speed of the sword, the leader's face suddenly changed. At this time, it was already too late for him to take out his saint weapon to block. In a panic, he twisted his body to the side and narrowly dodged the fatal blow. Without any hesitation, he immediately retreated, pulling away from Xianxia. Even though his attack had failed, Xianxia's expression didn't change in the slightest. Holding the light wind sword in his hand, he charged towards the rest of the Zhou mercenary group. With a flash of the sword, 4 of the great saint-level mercenaries had their throats pierced. Even though their armor wasn't weak, in front of Xianxia's light wind sword, it was as weak as tofu. Although it took a long time to describe, everything happened in an instant. At this time, many of the Zhou mercenary group's members hadn't even reacted. From the moment Xianxia started to kill the 4 mercenaries, not even a breath's worth of time had passed. "Stop!" At this time, The mercenary who had escaped from Jianxin's sword shouted. From Jianxin's lightning-fast sword, he could tell that Jianxin's strength was not to be underestimated. At this time, even with the Zhou mercenary group's strength, they didn't want to make an enemy out of him for no reason. Jianxin turned a deaf ear to the man's shout. In his heart, he had already given the order to kill the Zhou mercenary group's members. The light wind sword was like the scythe of the Grim Reaper, mercilessly reaping the lives of the Zhou mercenary group's members. The great saints of the Zhou mercenary group were completely powerless in front of Jianxin. Many of them couldn't even catch a glimpse of the sword before their throats were pierced. Even the Saint Masters were only able to block a few of Jianxin's moves before their lives were taken by the light wind sword. With Jianxin's strength having reached the Saint Master level, it was much easier for him to deal with these Saint Masters. These Saint Masters were basically unable to harm Jianxin. They couldn't even touch the corner of Jianxin's clothes. Jianxin's figure constantly flashed in and out of the Zhou mercenary group's group. It was as if he had countless eyes all over his body, constantly paying attention to his surroundings. As for the attacks coming from all directions, he was always able to dodge them. As a result, even though Jianxin was surrounded by enemies from all sides, there was almost no one who could truly harm him. Jianxin's attacks were incomparably sharp. The speed at which he killed people was simply unimaginable. While facing the encirclement of more than 40 people, Jianxin was able to kill more than 20 people in just a few breaths of time. Among them, there were even a few Saint Masters. Seeing that Jianxin had effortlessly killed more than 20 people, the leader of the mercenaries felt his heart turn cold. His face, which was hidden behind his helmet, had also become somewhat pale. At the same time, he was very puzzled. He did not know when he had offended such a powerful person in front of him. He had actually attacked the people of the Zhou mercenary group without even saying a single word. Moreover, he did not show any mercy. The leader's originally feverish head instantly calmed down. He quickly thought about it, then hesitated for a moment before finally making up his mind. He turned around and fled. He also knew clearly that with the strength Jianxin had displayed, even if he stayed, he wouldn't be able to change the situation. In the end, he would only die. Rather than that, he might as well take advantage of this opportunity to escape. However, before he could run 20 meters, a figure shot at him from behind at an extremely fast speed. The person was extremely fast and caught up with him in the blink of an eye. A gleaming silver-white longsword left a thin ray of light in the air and stabbed straight at the back of his neck. The leader of the Zhou mercenary group also had the strength of a high-level Saint Master. Sensing the sword chi coming from behind him, he didn't even look at it. Instead, he did a lazy donkey roll to dodge the attack. He then pushed off the ground with both hands and jumped up. At the same time, a long spear appeared between his hands. A powerful Saint Chi surged from the spear and immediately pierced towards Jianxin. Jianxin's movements didn't slow down at all. His body slightly swayed as he dodged the long sword. Once again, he arrived in front of the leader. With a wave of his hand, the silver-white light wind sword turned into a sky full of sword images that surrounded the mercenary. There were tens of thousands of sword images that overlapped with each other. It was a dazzling sight to behold. It was simply impossible to distinguish the real from the fake. When faced with the sky-covering sword shadows, this high-level sacred expert leader didn't know how to defend himself at all. During that moment of hesitation, a silver-white sword tip emerged from the sky-covering sword shadows, stabbing into his throat. Pang! Jianxin once again kicked the leader's chest, sending him flying far away. Holding the light wind sword in his hand, he once again turned around to kill the remaining members of the Zhou mercenary group. Towards the members of the Zhou mercenary group, Jianxin wouldn't let a single one of them go. Captain Qing Yunlong is dead. Captain Qing Yunlong is dead. Captain Qing Yunlong is dead, everyone run. The death of the leader immediately caused the members of the Zhou mercenary group to panic. One by one, they lost their will to fight. Facing Jianxin, who was like the incarnation of the death god, the members of the Zhou mercenary group all lost the courage to continue fighting. One by one, they threw away their armor and scattered in all directions. After Jianxin had killed a few people, The remaining members of the Zhou mercenary group had already used all of their strength to escape in all directions. Although Jianshan's speed wasn't slow, if he wanted to stop them all, it would be an extremely difficult matter. The members of the Zhou mercenary group, none of you will be able to escape. Jianshan's eyes flashed with an intense killing intent. In the next moment, the light wind sword suddenly emitted a powerful and sharp sword qi. Following that, the light wind sword left Jianshan's hand and actually flew out by itself. It turned into a silver-white light, and with an unparalleled speed, it chased after the fleeing members of the Zhou mercenary group. At this moment, Jianshan didn't hesitate to use the divine sword technique in order to exterminate the remaining members of the Zhou mercenary group. Chapter 151. The light wind sword seemed to have transformed into an immortal sword. After circling in the air once, it flew back into Jianshan's hands. Jianshan reached out to receive the light wind sword. At this moment, the light wind sword's body was covered with blood. But even so, it still couldn't hide its sharpness. When the light wind sword returned to Jianshan's hands, the blood on the sword seemed to have been given a life of its own. Finally, the blood gathered at the tip of the sword and dripped onto the ground. In the blink of an eye, the light wind sword that was originally covered in blood once again regained its former glory. The sword's body was as smooth as a mirror, and it emitted a hazy silver glow. In the midst of the green forest, the sword emitted a dazzling light. Jianshan's eyes swept over the corpses on the ground. He then walked over to one of the corpses and flicked his light wind sword at the Zhou mercenary squad's space belt. Immediately, the space belt around the Zhou mercenary squad's waist was flattened, and the space belt fell onto a relatively clean area not too far away. After that, Jianshan used the light wind sword to pick up the space belts of the Zhou mercenaries' corpses one by one. Very quickly, a small pile of space belts had been accumulated. After collecting all the space belts of the Zhou mercenaries' corpses, Jianshan also put away the light wind sword. Then he walked over to the pile of space belts and began to inspect them one by one. He took out all the magic cores and coins and placed them on the ground one by one. Not long after, over 40 space belts had been searched by Jianshan. In front of him, there was a small pile of magic cores and coins. In total, there were over 300 magic cores. Almost all of them were level 1 or 2 magic cores. There was less than a tenth of them that were level 3 magic cores. As for level 4 magic cores, there wasn't even a single one of them. As for the other pile of coins, almost half of them were copper coins and silver coins. There was only a small portion of gold coins, about 500 of them. As for purple crystal coins, there were less than 50 of them. Adding up all the coins here, there were about 70 purple crystal coins. Jianshan didn't think that it was too little. He put all the magic cores and coins into his own space belt and left, leaving behind a large pile of space belts and corpses on the ground. Everything that was valuable in the space belt had been taken out by Jianshan, leaving behind only a few useless items. Jianshan didn't leave the area. Instead, he continued to hide in a large tree 2 kilometers away, waiting for the mercenaries who wanted to capture him. He already knew that there were many mercenaries in the magical Beast Mountain range looking for him. They wanted to capture him and bring him to the Tianxiong clan for a reward. However, because the magical Beast Mountain range was too big and the terrain was very complicated, it was difficult for people to find each other even if they were 100 meters away. Therefore, the number of mercenaries that Jianshan encountered was pitifully small. In the magical Beast Mountain range, the mercenaries that were scattered all over the place were gathering in this direction. The Zhou mercenary group was just a step ahead of them. Not long after, Jianshan, who was hiding in a large tree, discovered another group of mercenaries below him. This group only had a dozen people. In terms of numbers, they couldn't compare to the Zhou mercenary group at all. However, Jianshan could clearly feel that each of these people had the strength of a Saint Master. Their overall strength wasn't any weaker than the Zhou mercenary group. Just as the group of mercenaries passed by the tree that Jianshan was hiding in, Jianshan suddenly jumped down from the dense foliage. Both of his feet kicked off the tree trunk, and his entire body shot towards one of the mercenaries. At the same time, the light wind sword appeared in his hand, emitting a sharp sword chi as it pierced towards the person. The reaction of the group of mercenaries wasn't too fast. Just as Jianshan made a move, they had already noticed him. However, Jianshan's speed was extremely fast. By the time they turned around, Jianshan was already very close to them. The light wind sword in his hand turned into a thin silver light and pierced through the mercenary's right shoulder before he could react. At the same time, the rest of the group of mercenaries also took out their saint weapons and rushed towards Jianshan. At the same time, the rest of the mercenaries also rushed forward, trying to surround Jianshan. Jianshan pulled out the light wind sword from the mercenary's shoulder. Immediately after, the light wind sword continuously flashed as it danced in the air, blocking the saint weapons of the group of saint masters. Afterwards, the silver light wind sword was like a poisonous snake as it pierced towards another person. This person hurriedly took out his saint weapon to block, but Jianshan's attacks were too fast. In just 2 moves, the mercenary's right shoulder was pierced through. "You're courting death." Seeing that another person was injured, the rest of the mercenaries were enraged. Their saint weapons were filled with saint force as they mercilessly attacked Jianshan. Jianshan floated backwards, nimbly retreating a distance of 10 meters. Following his retreat, the attacks from the other side also missed. In the end, the saint weapons that were infused with saint force fiercely struck the ground, creating a 1-meter-deep crater. Jianshan's right hand held his light wind sword and pointed it towards the ground as he calmly stared at the mercenaries in front of him. "You dare to sneak attack me, you bastard? You must be tired of living." A tall and sturdy man rudely cursed as he raised his sword and rushed towards Jianshan. "Bantu!" The tall and sturdy man had only taken a few steps when he was blocked by a middle-aged man with a resolute expression. The tall and sturdy man turned his head and angrily stared at the middle-aged man who had blocked him. He roared, "Mu Jian, don't block me. Can't you see that Ha Duo and Urk were injured by this bastard?" The middle-aged man who had been called Mu Jian lightly shook his head and ignored the tall and sturdy man. He turned his gaze towards Jianshan and said, "This friend, may I ask why you suddenly attacked us? You must have come here to capture a person called Jianshan." Jianshan indifferently said. Hearing this, the middle-aged man called Mu Jian's eyes suddenly fell onto the light wind sword in Jianshan's hand. Then, as if he had thought of something, his expression couldn't help but change as he said, "Could it be that you are Jianshan?" "That's right, I am Jianshan." Jianshan's face revealed a trace of a smile, but no matter how one looked at it, this smile was somewhat evil. Hearing this, the mercenaries looked at each other with excitement in their eyes. They never would have thought that the Jianshan they had been searching so hard for would actually appear here. If they could capture him now, then wouldn't the 10,000 purple crystal coins be theirs? However, the middle-aged man called Mu Jian didn't have the slightest trace of happiness on his face. Instead, he had a somewhat dignified expression. "So you are Jianshan, this is really too. Shut up." Chapter 152. Jianshan chuckled and said, "I don't dare. Sir Mu Jian really thinks too highly of me. I presume that the reason why you guys entered the magical beast mountain range is also to find me." "That's right, we came here to catch you." As soon as Jianshan's voice faded, the big man who was stopped by Mu Jian a moment ago loudly said. The big man's words caused Mu Jian's complexion to change slightly. He turned his head and fiercely glared at the big man, causing the big man's face to be filled with confusion. Mu Jian cupped his hands towards Jianshan and said with a chuckle, "Sir Jianshan, we entered the magical beast mountain range just to watch the fun. We didn't have any intention of catching Sir. It seems that Sir must have misunderstood us." "Misunderstood?" Jianshan said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "If I didn't hear wrong, I seem to have heard the friend beside you say that you guys entered the magical beast mountain range to catch me. How could it be a misunderstanding?" Hearing this, Mu Jian's face revealed a trace of embarrassment. They had indeed entered the magical beast mountain range to catch Jianshan. Although they had heard of Jianshan's strength before, and there were several saint masters who had died in his hands, those were after all just rumors. Many people still maintained a skeptical attitude towards the rumors, and Mu Jian's group was no exception. But after personally witnessing Jianxin's strength, Mu Jian immediately judged that they weren't Jianxin's match. Even if they had the advantage in numbers, they still wouldn't be able to catch Jianxin. Moreover, they would also have to suffer considerable losses. Moreover, Mu Jian was also very clear that if Jianxin had wanted to take the lives of those two, they would have already been lying on the ground. Therefore, at this moment, Mu Jian had already given up on the idea of catching Jianxin. At the very least, at this moment, he still couldn't have a conflict with Jianxin. Otherwise, the ones who would suffer losses would only be his group. Seeing that Mu Jian didn't speak, Jianxin opened his mouth again and said, "I also don't want to indiscriminately kill the innocent. Hand over all the magic cores in your spatial belts as payment for your lives. If not, then don't blame me, Jianxin, for being vicious and merciless." Towards the end of his words, a trace of intense killing intent flashed through Jianxin's eyes. Hearing Jianxin's words, the dozen or so people in front of him all revealed expressions of anger and disdain. Among them, not all of them had eyes as bright as Mu Jian's. "Jianxin, you despicable person who only knows how to use sneak attacks, what qualifications do you have to say such words? Come and eat your grandfather's sword." Jianxin's words angered quite a few people. Immediately, a tall and sturdy man holding a two-handed greatsword aggressively rushed towards Jianxin. "Wait." Mu Jian's figure flashed and blocked that burly man. Ignoring that burly man's furious gaze, he turned his head to look at Jianxin and said in a deep voice, "Jianxin, we have no intention of becoming enemies with you. Could it be that you really want to force us?" A cold smile appeared on Jianxin's face as he said, "I'll still say the same thing. Hand over your magic cores and I'll let you go. Otherwise, I'll have to do it myself." After saying that, Jianxin paused for a moment before continuing, "However, if we really fight, then don't blame me for the deaths and injuries that occur." Jianxin's words left no room for discussion, causing Mu Jian's expression to become somewhat gloomy. He said in a deep voice, "As the saying goes, leave a line for everything, and it will be easier to deal with in the future. Sire Jianxin, aren't you going a little too far?" The magic cores in his spatial belt were the result of him and the others risking their lives to hunt magical beasts in the Magical Beast Mountain range. After that, he had accumulated them over a long period of time. Although Mu Jian knew that if he and the others were to fight with Jianxin, they would definitely suffer some injuries, but it was impossible for them to hand over all the magic cores that they had painstakingly accumulated over a long period of time. "Mu Jian, why are you speaking so much nonsense with him? Why don't you just directly capture him? He's just one person and he wants all of us to hand over all the magic cores in our pouches. That's simply a huge joke." A middle-aged man with golden hair standing behind Mu Jian said in a deep voice. His tone was full of disdain. "Jianxin, although you have injured two of us brothers, that was only because you used a sneak attack. If we were to fight you head-on, then even if we were to attack you together, you still wouldn't necessarily be our match. In the end, the most that would happen would be both sides suffering injuries. That wouldn't be good for either of us, especially you. If you were to be seriously injured, then it would be very disadvantageous for you. After all, in the Magical Beast Mountain range, there are people everywhere who would want to capture you. Either we let this matter go, or we fight to the death. In short, if you want us to hand over our magic cores, then that's absolutely impossible." The one who spoke was a tall man. It was obvious that he could tell that Jianxin wasn't weak from Jianxin's actions. Jianxin's eyes flashed with a cold light. He slowly raised his light wind sword and said in a deep voice, "Since that's the case, then let's fight." After saying that, he rushed towards the 10 people in front of him. Mu Jian didn't waste any more words and rushed forward with the 10 people behind him. The 10 people immediately began to fight. Every one of these 10 people had the strength of a Saint Master. If it was before, Jianxin would have a hard time defending against the encirclement of 10 Saint Masters. But now, with his strength at the Saint Master level, he could easily deal with the encirclement of more than 10 Saint Masters. Jianxin relied on his profound footwork and his sword, which was so fast that even Saint Masters found it hard to block, to fight evenly with the dozen or so Saint Masters. Even though Jianchen was at an absolute disadvantage in terms of numbers, it didn't take long before the dozen or so people were gradually forced into a disadvantageous position by Jianchen. During this period of time, there were a few people who were almost stabbed in the throat by Jianchen, but they were always saved by the people beside them at the crucial moment. Even though that was the case, there were still quite a few people who were injured by Jianchen. Jianchen's movements were like a ghost as he shuttled through the crowd, dodging the attacks coming from all directions. The light wind sword in his hand was so fast that it became a blur. As the light wind sword danced in the air, the friction between it and the air created a small sound that seemed to form a straight line. Pooh! The tip of the light wind sword was filled with sword chi as it pierced through one of the people's right arm joints. At the same time, the sword chi drilled into the person's body, destroying the function of his right arm. That person immediately let out a painful cry as the large sword in his hand disappeared. His right shoulder had been pierced through and he no longer had the strength to hold a weapon and had lost the ability to fight. Chapter 153. An injury to the right shoulder would directly affect one's ability to wield a weapon and display their strength. The injuries of those who had been pierced by Jianchen's light wind sword were far more severe than they had imagined. The light wind sword's sharp sword chi had already damaged their right shoulder, causing them to lose the ability to fight. The injured people could only helplessly retreat as Jianchen and the other 10 people continued to fight. The sounds of weapons clashing constantly rang out on the battlefield. The powerful shockwaves of Saint Force swept out in all directions with everyone at the center, pressing some of the weeds to the ground. Dust flew into the air, obscuring the figures of the people fighting, making it difficult to see them clearly. From time to time, there would be a few screams mixed with pain. Soon after, there would be people who would be sent flying or covered in blood as they retreated from the battlefield. Of the 10 people fighting in the battlefield, there were constantly people who were injured. Not long after, the original 10 people had shrunk down to only a few people. The intense movements made Jianchen's figure look somewhat miserable, but his body was not injured in the slightest. After blocking a saint weapon, Jianchen's light wind sword once again turned into a silver light and pierced through the opponent's right shoulder before they could react. I don't want to kill the innocent. I'll give you one last chance. If you continue to be stubborn, then don't blame me for killing you. Jianchen did not stop at all. He called out as killing intent flickered in his eyes. Clearly he was ready to kill. Previously, he had already been merciful to these people. If they continued to be stubborn, then he would have no choice but to kill them. In the Tianyuan continent, this kind of thing was very common, so Jianchen did not feel that he had done anything wrong. After all, this was a world where strength was respected. The strong could cover the sky with one hand and do whatever they wanted, but the weak never had the right to speak. Now that so many mercenaries and various powers had entered the mountain range of magical beasts, almost all of them had the goal of capturing Jianchen and handing him over to the Tianxiong clan for a reward. Even the 10 or so people on the other side were no exception. If not for the fact that Jianchen's strength was greater than theirs, perhaps the situation would have been completely different. When he heard these words, a struggling expression appeared on the face of the middle-aged man called Mu Jian. His gaze swept across the few injured men who had lost their ability to fight. Finally, he clenched his teeth and shouted, "Stop!" Mu Jian's prestige in the hearts of these people was not weak. As soon as he spoke, those who were still fighting with Jianchen immediately retreated. Each and every one of them looked at Jianchen with fear lingering in their hearts. But most of their gazes were focused on the light wind sword in Jianchen's hand. With regards to the lightning-fast speed of the light wind sword, they had personally experienced it. Each and every one of them was terrified. In the battle just now, they had almost been injured by the light wind sword several times. Fortunately, they had been saved in the nick of time. Mu Jian looked at Jianchen with a complicated expression. His gaze paused on the blood-stained light wind sword in Jianchen's hand. With a dispirited expression, he weakly said, "Everyone, take out all of your demon cores. Sir Jianchen has already shown us mercy. Otherwise, you wouldn't have just been injured." This time, no one was unconvinced. The 10 or so people all had dispirited expressions on their faces as they silently took out all of their demon cores from their space belts and piled them on the ground. After the battle just now, all of them understood that even if they all attacked together, they still wouldn't be a match for the young man in front of them. The speed of the light wind sword was so fast that even if they used all of their strength to block, they would only be able to last a few rounds. These 10 or so Saint Masters all had quite a few demon cores on them. Although there weren't many demon cores of the 3rd level, there were quite a few demon cores of the 1st and 2nd level. Jianchen, this is all of our demon cores. Can we leave now? Mu Jian's expression was not very good as he spoke in a low voice. Jianchen's gaze swept across the small pile of demon cores on the ground. His face couldn't help but reveal a trace of a smile as he said, "If you had taken them out earlier, then wouldn't all of this have been fine? Alright, Jianchen, do not dare call myself a gentleman, but I am someone who keeps my promises. You all can leave now." Mu Jian and the others' gazes paused on the small pile of demon cores on the ground for a while. Their eyes revealed a trace of reluctance as they helplessly let out a sigh and left with a sense of loss. Although there weren't many demon cores, they were still a few dozen years' worth of demon cores. Remember, I don't want to see you try to deal with me again. Otherwise, I won't give you any face. It's best if you all leave the Devil Beast Mountain range. Before the 10 or so people had even taken a few steps, Jianchen's calm voice sounded out from behind them. Hearing these words, Mu Jian and the others' bodies paused for a moment, but no one said anything. Very quickly, they disappeared into the dense forest. Jianchen put away the light wind sword and slowly walked towards the pile of demon cores. He bent down and collected all of them into his spatial belt. There were about 200 demon cores in this small pile. Most of them were demon cores of the 1st and 2nd level. There were less than 20 demon cores of the 3rd level. After collecting all of the demon cores into his spatial belt, Jianchen unhurriedly straightened his body. His face revealed a trace of a cold smile as he suddenly said, "Friend, you've been here for so long and have seen enough. Isn't it time for you to come out?" Ha! Just as Jianchen's voice fell, a loud laughter sounded out from the forest. Immediately after, a gray figure shot out like lightning and landed about 20 meters away from Jianchen. The person who came was an old man. He looked to be about 50 or 60 years old. The old man's face was flushed red and his pair of bright eyes were filled with vigor. Behind his back, there were a few strands of silver mixed in with messy hair that draped over his shoulders. He looked a bit down and out. The old man was wearing a gray robe and his stature was a bit taller than Jianchen. Although he was just standing there, Jianchen could feel an invisible pressure enveloping him. Facing this old man, Jianchen didn't dare to lower his guard. His face became serious as he stared at the old man and slowly said, "Great Saint Master." Chapter 154. Jianchen took a deep breath. Although he had already guessed that there would be a great Saint Master level expert who wouldn't be able to resist the temptation of 10,000 purple crystal coins and come to deal with him, he didn't think that he would encounter one so quickly. However, Jianchen didn't feel the slightest bit of fear. Although he didn't dare say that he could defeat a great Saint Master level expert, he was still confident that he could protect himself. At the same time, Jianchen was also secretly rejoicing. Fortunately, he had the foresight to raise his strength from a great saint to a Saint Master level expert. Otherwise, if he faced a great Saint Master with his original strength, he would have no choice but to run. Facing a great Saint Master, even though Jianchen felt an extremely great pressure, he quickly calmed down. His pair of calm eyes didn't have the slightest bit of emotion as he calmly stared at the old man before him. He opened his mouth and said, "Old sir, could it be that you've also come to capture me because of the temptation of 10,000 purple crystal coins?" "Little child, you already know the answer. This old man won't waste words with you. Are you going to obediently come with me, or do you want this old man to personally take action? However, you have to understand that this old man isn't as easy to deal with as those 10 Saint Masters from before." The old man looked at Jianchen with a relaxed expression, as if he didn't put Jianchen in his eyes at all. Jianchen coldly snorted as the light wind sword appeared in his right hand. Jianchen pointed the tip of the sword at the ground and proudly said, "Giving up without putting up a fight has never been my, Jianchen's, style. Old sir, let this one experience your skills." As soon as he finished speaking, Jianchen's body turned into a ghost, leaving behind afterimages as he rushed towards the old man. The short distance of 20 meters was crossed in the blink of an eye. The light wind sword in Jianchen's hand was covered in a layer of hazy sword aura as it turned into a silver light that pierced towards the old man's throat. The old man's nonchalant expression disappeared in an instant and was replaced with a dignified expression. Saint Qi surged from his palm and formed into a foot-long dagger. The dagger flickered with a cold light as it flew towards the light wind sword. When the light wind sword and the old man's dagger collided in midair, a clear sound rang out. Immediately after, a powerful shockwave of Saint Qi spread out in all directions from the collision of the two weapons. Wherever the shockwave of Saint Qi came into contact with it, the surrounding weeds were immediately torn apart. When the shockwave of Saint Qi reached the ground, the soft soil on the ground was pressed down by the shockwave. A light groan came from Jianchen's throat as Jianchen's body uncontrollably retreated a few meters. Every step he took left a deep imprint in the ground. A great Saint Master really is strong. I didn't think that after reaching the Saint Master level, there would still be such a large gap between me and a great Saint Master. Jianchen thought to himself. This time he was clearly at a disadvantage. After all, this time, Jianchen was completely relying on the strength of his Saint Qi. How could he possibly be a match for the old man? However, Jianchen was secretly delighted. This time, when he clashed with the old man, he clearly understood just how big of a gap there was between him and a great Saint Master. This allowed him to calm down quite a bit. On the other hand, the old man's expression became even more serious as he stared at Jianchen and said, "Little child, you aren't simple. It seems that if I want to capture you, old man will have to put in a lot of effort." Jianchen's face revealed a cold smile as he said, "I'm afraid that even if you use all of your strength, you still won't be able to capture me." The old man's eyes flashed with a cold light as he coldly laughed. "Little child, you really know how to talk big. Today, I'll let old man properly deal with you. Let's see just how much ability you have." As soon as he finished speaking, the dagger in the old man's hand suddenly exploded with Saint Qi, completely submerging the dagger. Then, the old man's figure flashed and suddenly appeared in front of Jianchen. The dagger was filled with Saint Qi as it pierced through the air towards Jianchen's heart. Facing a great Saint Master, Jianchen didn't dare to lower his guard in the slightest. He circulated the Saint Qi in his body and gathered it on the light wind sword. With a wave of his right hand, the light wind sword left behind a blurry afterimage as it fiercely collided with the old man's dagger. At that moment, an even stronger shockwave than before exploded outwards, wreaking havoc in all directions. The soil on the ground was sent flying as dust filled the air. The powerful shockwave of the Saint Qi caused the surrounding weeds to be torn to shreds. Countless amounts of plant powder were sent flying into the air. After that attack, Jianchen's body once again uncontrollably retreated a few steps. On the other hand, the old man was completely fine as he continued to chase after Jianchen. With a slight sway of his body, the old man quickly arrived in front of Jianchen and once again stabbed his dagger towards Jianchen's heart. Jianchen's body slightly twisted as the dagger brushed past his clothes. Following that, the light wind sword suddenly turned into a blur that enveloped the old man. In that short moment, Jianchen had already stabbed out 10 times at an extremely fast speed. Each strike was accurately aimed at the old man's vitals. The old man pulled back his dagger with lightning-like speed. He swung the dagger so fast that it turned into a blur, blocking Jianchen's attack. Ding 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 ding. Following the sounds of weapons colliding, the light wind sword and the old man's dagger had already collided more than 10 times in a short period of time. The sound of the weapons colliding was so concentrated that it seemed to have formed a continuous line. Following that, the old man's body was somewhat embarrassed as he retreated. At this moment, the gray robes that he was wearing were no longer as intact as before. There were a few cracks on his chest, but there was no blood flowing out. Behind the old man, there were a few strands of hair that were slowly falling to the ground. If one looked closely, the old man's messy hair was shorter than before. On the other side, Xianxia didn't look much better than the old man. Although he wasn't injured, his face was sickly pale. Looking at the cracks on his robes, the old man's face became gloomy as he said in a low voice, "You don't know how to appreciate kindness. Don't blame me for being ruthless." Xianxia coldly smiled. "There have been many Saint Masters who have died under my sword, but there has never been a great Saint Master who has died under my light wind sword. Today you will be the first." Chapter 155. Xianxia wasn't afraid in the slightest. Wielding his light wind sword, he charged forward and the two once again engaged in a fierce battle. This time, Xianxia was able to fully utilize his advantage. Using his profound movement technique, he was able to deal with the old man while using the light wind sword to continuously stab at the old man. Facing the old man's attacks, Xianxia did his best to avoid them. From beginning to end, he did his best to avoid clashing with the old man's saint weapon. Only when he was unable to dodge would he use the light wind sword to block. The dagger in the old man's hand flew up and down under his nimble control. The old man had already reached a level of mastery over the use of the dagger. He was able to use the dagger to perfection, always stabbing out with lightning speed at Xianxia's heart when he wasn't paying attention. The two figures quickly shuttled through the field. The wind brought about by their rapid movements had gradually turned into gusts of wind, blowing the surrounding weeds and powder that had already fallen to the ground in the air once again. Although the two figures were constantly moving back and forth, under Xianxia's deliberate control, their weapons rarely clashed. The more the old man fought, the more depressed he became. In the end, he only felt a stomach full of anger. He was clearly stronger than his opponent, but because his opponent had the advantage in speed and reaction time, he couldn't do anything to his opponent. Moreover, there were many times when even with his strength as a great Saint Master, he was forced into a state of panic by the frightening speed of the sword, almost to the point where his life was hanging by a thread. "Kid, if you're a man, then fight me to your heart's content. What's the point of fighting like this?" After fighting for a while, the old man finally couldn't hold it in any longer and shouted. Hearing this, Xianxia's face revealed a trace of ridicule and said, "Using one's weakness against another's strength is not a wise choice. Do you think I'm that stupid?" The old man was suddenly at a loss for words. Then he stopped talking. An intense killing intent flashed in his eyes. His hands moved even faster. Every move of his dagger was aimed at Xianxia's vital points. Clearly, he had decided to kill him. Sensing that the old man had no intention of showing any mercy, Xianxia's eyes flashed with a cold light. The speed of his sword suddenly increased, becoming twice as fast as before. The sword shadows that filled the sky overlapped, and it looked like the entire space was filled with countless sword shadows. It was impossible to distinguish between the real and the fake. As Xianxia used his full strength, the pressure the old man faced immediately increased. Although he had the strength of a great Saint Master and his speed wasn't slow, he still couldn't be compared to Xianxia. Soon he was forced into a panic by Xianxia. Whoosh! At this moment, within the sword shadows that filled the sky, a sharp sword suddenly appeared. Before the old man could even react, the sharp blade of the sword had already cut through his right wrist. The pain from his wrist caused the old man to be slightly startled. But in the next moment, the light wind sword once again filled the sky with sword shadows and pierced towards the old man. The old man quickly waved his dagger, creating an impenetrable defense in front of him. At the same time, he retreated. However, just as he was about to retreat, the old man's body suddenly stopped. At the same time, a bloody sword pierced through the old man's throat and came out from under his chin. He didn't know when, but Xianxia was already standing behind the old man. The light wind sword had already pierced through the old man's neck, and the other end of the sword pierced through his throat. The old man's eyes were lifeless as he stared at the sword that had pierced through his throat. His eyes were filled with disbelief. At the same time, his mind was filled with questions. He didn't know when Xianxia had appeared behind him, but he didn't even notice. However, the old man didn't have the chance to ask these questions. His body remained in the same position for a while before slowly falling to the ground. His eyes were wide open as he died with remaining grievances. Slowly pulling out the sword, Xianxia let out a long breath. The battle with this great Saint Master had taken a lot of his energy. Now that the battle was over, he couldn't help but feel a bit out of breath. Xianxia withdrew the light wind sword and looked at the old man lying on the ground. He helplessly sighed and muttered, 10 years of cultivation was destroyed in a single day. AI, why did you have to do this? If you hadn't been consumed by greed, how could you have ended up like this? After sighing inwardly, Xianxia took off the old man's spatial belt. After rummaging through it, he took out all of the items that had been inside. The old man's spatial belt didn't have as many monster cores as Xianxia had expected. There were only about 50 of them, but the lowest was a rank 2 monster core. There wasn't a single rank 1 monster core. More than half of them were rank 2 monster cores, and there were about 20 rank 3 monster cores. There was also 1 rank 4 monster core. Other than the monster cores, Xianxia also took out about 70 purple crystal coins from the old man's spatial belt. After storing the monster cores and purple crystal coins into his own space belt, Xianxia rummaged through the old man's space belt again. Suddenly, his face changed and he took out a piece of white fur from his space belt. This piece of white fur was about the size of a palm and was covered with soft white hair. It was very comfortable to hold in one's hand and even gave off a warm feeling. This piece of fur. Xianxia looked at the piece of white fur in his hand with surprise. He immediately threw away the old man's spatial belt and took out an exquisite spatial ring from his own spatial belt. He then took out a red silk pouch. This red silk pouch was the one that Xianxia's mother, Bai Yuntian, had given to him before he left. It was the Bai family's heirloom. Xianxia nimbly opened the silk pouch and took out a piece of white fur. He casually shook it and unfolded it. The piece of fur inside the silk pouch was actually about the size of a palm. Xianxia held the 2 pieces of fur and compared them with each other. The surprise in his eyes grew stronger and stronger. This was because he discovered that not only were the 2 pieces of fur identical in size, but they were also made from the same material. It was as if the 2 pieces of fur were cut from the same piece of fur. Welcome to Legends of Cultivation, audiobooks, where we bring ancient fantasy to life through storytelling. Follow the rise of heroes who defy fate, unlock mystical powers, and battle across celestial realms. Our audiobooks are crafted for fans of Chinese cultivation novels, filled with battles, breakthroughs, and legendary artifacts. Subscribe and be part of an unforgettable journey into the realm of immortality.